Wellington's inner-city residents want the government to provide money and other support if they're going to tighten the rules on earthquake-prone buildings. The City Council's Strategy Committee today debated its position on the government's proposed regulations for assessing and strengthening quake-prone buildings. But before they did, they were told to remember strengthening doesn't come cheap. Here's our local government reporter, Michael Kropp.
Roughly 660 buildings in Wellington are deemed earthquake-prone. At least one of those is an apartment block with 7 tenants and a strengthening bill of more than $1 million. The Inner City Residents Association says now is a good time to distinguish between commercial and residential buildings to ease that burden. Its president, Geraldine Murphy, says that one-size-fits-all approach will impose significant costs on residents.
This is a whole conundrum, isn't it? We've got a legislation that's applying across the board to residential owners and buildings that the public are using. So if the government wants to get those things happening faster, they have to provide support.
She says that means engineering and technical support, as well as cold, hard cash. The Council's Strategy Committee Chair Iona Pannett agrees. Strengthening is expensive, and the government needs to take that into account.
The issue of cost is a bugbear and has been a particularly difficult issue. Unfortunately, when the legislation was developed, Councillor Eagle, the government in the regulatory impact statement refused to acknowledge that there would be a cost on owners. They just ignored the issue.
And some building owners balk at the commercial interest rates of having to take out a loan to pay for the strengthening. Mark Butcher is the chief executive of the local government funding agency. It provides loans to councils at lower rates and for longer periods than commercial banks. Mr. Butcher says if councils want, they can borrow that money and then lend it out to building owners.
If they had it factored into their long-term plan or their annual plan budgets, then local government funding agency could lend to councils. We don't make a call on what councils use their borrowing from the LGFA for.
Ms. Pannett says they're looking into that.
We need to make sure that we look at all of the options, whether it's tax deductibility, or loans, or grants, and just see what's actually going to work for people. Because the great risk is that this legislation will not work if people can't afford to do the work.
Andy Foster, who chairs the Council's Finance Committee, holds reservations.
Is there a mechanism to provide access to cheaper finance? That's something which we have talked about, we've looked at, and no doubt we will continue to explore. The pro is that you are able to help building owners out. The cons are that you do expose yourself to some risk.
But Mr. Foster says it could be a good investment because it's much cheaper to strengthen buildings than repair them. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Michael Kropp there, mate.